Good morning. My name is Thomas Kimsey. I'm with the National Rural Lenders Roundtable. I'm pleased to partner with the USDA this morning to present the USDA B&I CARES Act program. We're pleased to be here this morning. On behalf of the National Rural Lenders Roundtable, thank you, Brenda, for the opportunity to partner with Hawaii and the Western Pacific. We're certainly excited about it, and always like held webinar for you on the CARES Act this morning, and an excellent group of panelists that will be joining us as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Diego, your area director for Guam. So Joe, I'll let you introduce the panelists, and Joe will be our moderator this morning as well.
Thank you, Thomas. Good morning, hafa day, and aloha to our friends and partners who are in attendance for today's meeting. On behalf of USDA Rural Development, I'd like to welcome you to today's National Rural Lenders Roundtable presentation on the USDA Business and Industry CARES Act. Just want to also inform the participants that today's presentation will be recorded, and the YouTube link will be available shortly after the conference. We have often heard that the COVID-19 epidemic has set our lives into unprecedented times. And just as we are all adapting to the new norm of doing business, today's presentation represents another avenue that the federal government is hoping will assist businesses adapt to this new norm and get our economy back and running. So before we start and introduce the panelists, I'd like to just go over the House rules for all those in attendance. You may ask your questions on the chat section, which I believe is on the right side of your screen. We have an individual that's monitoring the questions, and we will ask questions. We may not get to all of them, but we'll kind of address that towards the end of the presentation, and we'll give you some other contact information to contact the panelists. So again, you can use the GoToWebinars chat function, which is the platform you're on now on the right side. And then we'll have some contact information for your local contacts. For the panelists only, again, we're going to mute our media platform when we're not speaking. And then, as I mentioned, my name is Joe Diego. I'm the area director for Guam, Sinai, Republic of Palau, and Republic of the Marshall Islands. And our office is under the state of Hawaii. I'm also joined by Tony Barcinas from my staff. He's also on the line, and he'll be monitoring the questions that we will present to the panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists. I will first introduce them, and then I will cue them to say a few opening remarks. So you all met Thomas Kimsey, who's the president of the National Rural Lenders Roundtable. We also have Ms. Brenda Iokepa Moses. She is the State Director for Hawaii, American Samoa, and Western Pacific at our Hawaii State Office. We have Denise Salmeron, our Business Program Director, who also oversees Hawaii, American Samoa, and Western Pacific, all our business programs. And then we're happy to have our co-hosts and co-sponsors for this. We have Captain Castro, the President of the Guam Chamber of Commerce, and Eileen Agahan Igcasenza, the Executive Director of the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce. So without further ado, and we're going to try to keep this roundtable meeting to run to about 9 o'clock. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our first speaker, which will be Denise Salmeron, to go over the business and industry program in general. Thank you.
Joe, before Denise goes on, Denise, before you go on, I'll go ahead and do my introduction, because once we get into the business programs, a lot of those questions will probably be towards you. So I just want to take just a minute to introduce myself, Brenda Iokepa Moses. I'm the new State Director for Hawaii and the Western Pacific. USDA has been around since 1994, and previously in 1946 we were named under a different organization, but since 1994 we have about 4,389 current employees under the USDA Rural Development Division. 42 of those employees support Western Pacific, American Samoa, and Guam areas, Palau, Ponape. And so I'm very proud to be on this call today. We have some in-house experts. Denise is going to walk you through this B&I CARES Act, which is a great help for businesses. But we have over 40 programs, so I encourage everyone to look at our website to see all the different programs that we have that might be able to help you, your businesses, and your communities. Thank you. Go ahead, Denise.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Brenda. I apologize again. I went off the agenda here. Thomas, did you have any other further remarks you'd like to make for the opening?
No, I'm good, Joe. We're good. Thank you, though.
Okay. And then I'd like to open up to Catherine Castro also. Again, I apologize for missing that part, but Catherine Castro, the President of the Guam Chamber of Commerce, for a few remarks. Catherine?
Thank you, and half a day. My name is Catherine, and I'm with the Guam Chamber of Commerce. And thank you to our USDA Rural Development State Office and the National Rural Lenders Association for your efforts in bringing this presentation to our arena and in the Pacific. The Guam Chamber has served an improvement of the quality of life for all of our residents. While we truly appreciate the support that the federal government has provided to our businesses and our employees via the CARES Act in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, we are extremely concerned with the survival of our local businesses. The crippling effects this emergency crisis has had on our island economies in Guam and the CNMI have many companies making tough decisions about the future of their individual enterprises. We are pleased to hear of the recent announcement by USDA to provide $1 billion in loan guarantees for rural businesses and agricultural producers. And we hope that our island businesses will take advantage of this new opportunity to meet their working capital needs during this pandemic situation. I'd like to thank Joe Diego, Area Director for the Western Pacific Rural Development Office of USDA, for this collaborative effort with the Guam Chamber, Guam Women's Chamber, and the Saipan Chamber of Commerce. I'd also like to recognize Maxine Laszlo, Executive Director of the Saipan Chamber of Commerce, who is participating in this virtual event today. We appreciate you all for being with us this morning, and we join you in looking forward to today's virtual presentation. Seduus Moasi. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for those kind words, and we look forward to partnering again a lot closer with the Chamber of Commerce. I'd also now like to introduce Ms. Eileen Agahan Igcasenza. Joseph, I think that was her present PowerPoint slide you had on, so that's from under the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce. So I'd like to introduce Eileen to say a few opening remarks. Eileen?
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. We are happy to support today's webinar. We'd like to thank our resource partners, USDA RD, the National Rural Lenders Roundtable, for the invitation. And Joseph, if you can kindly pull up the slides again, thank you. All right, I'd like to give you a brief overview of our organization. Our vision is that Guam will be an island community whose economy is driven and influenced by the equal participation of women in business. And our mission is to advance women in business through advocacy, networking, mentorship, and access to resources. Next slide, please. September 3rd, 2013 marks the beginning of the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce. Our founding members saw the strong need for a businesswomen's advocacy group. And our first president was then CEO and president of the Bank of Guam, Liu Leon Guerrero, who now leads our island as Guam's beloved governor. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce to you our current board of directors, led by President Holly Rustick. Now, our board of directors are certainly an asset to an organization, and they are a notable group of women with diverse backgrounds and expertise. Next slide, please. So we have currently a board of 11, And so they represent different industries and certainly contribute to the organization in many ways. Next slide, please. A little bit about our membership. We have a nice representation. Since 2013, our membership has grown to over 200, a majority of them being individual or sole proprietors at 29%. We have a good number who own or are affiliated with businesses with 2 to 25 employees at 21%. And we also have those who own or affiliated with businesses with 26 or more employees at 22%. And we also have members that represent the government and nonprofit sector. Next slide, please. The Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce represents a wide range of trades and industries, and our top industries include services, banking and finance, education, and government. So as you can see, this is a list of the industries we currently represent. Next slide, please. Our primary objectives is to empower and advance women leadership. We host an annual Women's Leadership Conference, which is designed to inspire attendees and provide them the tools to start or expand their businesses or move their organization forward. We facilitate networking opportunities and partnerships at our bi-monthly general membership meetings and mixers. We provide mentorship for business startups through our industry advisement program, where members have access to an industry expert for up to 3 hours at no cost. We enhance professional development and influence legislative policies on issues facing women in business and the workplace. We have a very active government committee who reviews these policies and submits testimony. We advocate for competitive wages and benefits for women. And currently, the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, we do offer access to group health insurance coverage. We're one of the few organizations to offer insurance for individuals or sole proprietors. And ultimately, our goal is to increase the awareness of the importance of women on the island's economic, social, and cultural platform. This year, we're happy to say that we are launching Guam's first Women's Business Center, which will serve as the new headquarters of the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce. And we will be located in Hagutnya, Guam's capital. We invite you to visit our website, follow us on social media to learn more about our organization, and this is how you can reach us. Thank you again for the opportunity to present today.
Great, and thank you, Eileen, for that brief introduction on one of the new economic forces that's driving our economy. Appreciate that. And also, I'd be remiss, I'd like to also welcome Maxine Laszlo from the Saipan Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us, Maxine, and we can speak later again on other opportunities. So without further ado, I'd like to get into, I guess, the so-called meat and potatoes. I'd like to start by introducing Denise Salmeron, our Business Program Director, who's going to present an overview of our Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program. Denise?
Good morning and half a day, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar this morning. I was asked to give a brief overview of the Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program, but before we got into that, I just wanted to kind of let you know who Rural Development was. So United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, is responsible for developing and executing federal laws related to farming, agriculture, forestry, and food. Rural Development is only one of over 17 agencies that come under the USDA umbrella. Next slide. So our mission is to increase economic opportunities and improve the quality of life of rural America. Next slide. So we have over 40 loan and grant programs, and Rural Development has 3 agencies with unique missions that provide these services. So we have our rural housing service section that offers a variety of programs to build and improve housing and essential community facilities. Their programs provide grants, loan guarantees for single and multifamily housing, and as well as housing for farm labor and much more. Our community facilities and rural utility service administers programs that provide essential public services such as healthcare, education, public safety, and public services. They also provide infrastructure and infrastructure improvements for water and waste treatment, electric power, and telecommunication services. So the Rural Business Cooperative Service section is the section I work under. We offer programs to support business development and job training opportunities for rural residents. We offer programs that help provide capital, technical support, educational opportunities that can help residents start and grow businesses and access jobs in the bio-based economy. Next slide. So the Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program, that's our flagship program that we refer to as the B&I program. This program is designed to assist credit-worthy rural businesses obtain capital for almost any legal business purpose. The intent of this program is to save and create jobs. So one thing that I want to mention is it is a guaranteed program, so it's not a direct loan. So we will need a willing lender that will originate and service the loan. So eligible lenders under this program, it's lenders with legal authority, sufficient experience, and financial strength to operate a successful lending program. They include your federal and state chartered banks, saving and loans, farm credit banks, and credit unions. Eligible borrowers includes almost any legal entity, including for-profits, nonprofits, cooperatives, federally recognized tribes, public bodies, and individuals. So on loan limits, there's no minimum. The maximum is 10 million. With some exceptions, we can go up to 25 million with the administrator's exception, and we can go up to 40 million for rural cooperatives. That's so the rural area for the Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program, the population limit is 50,000, and for the Western Pacific region, all areas are considered eligible for this program. The percent of guarantee is on a sliding scale, so we offer an 80% guarantee for loans 5 million or less, 70% for loans between 5 and 10 million, and 60% for loans exceeding 10 million up to 25 million. So loan terms are negotiated between the lender and borrower, but we typically, the maximum repayment terms are 30 years for real estate, 15 years are useful life for equipment, and 7 years for working capital. Interest rates are also negotiated between the lender and borrower, subject to agency review. It can be fixed or variable, but must be tied, as long as a legal rate. Interest rates interest rates must be what those that the lender would customarily charge to borrowers without the guarantee. Next slide. So we can fund essentially almost any legal business purpose with some exceptions. So we can do business acquisitions, purchase of equipment, debt refinancing under certain conditions, startup costs, and working capital. I think what's more interesting in some of the things that we can't do. So we can't do lines of credit or lease payments. We don't do charitable or fraternal organizations, which is businesses that derive more than 10% of their annual gross revenue from tax-deductible charitable donations. We don't do owner-occupied housing unless it's a mixed-use commercial facility. We don't do racetracks, gambling, church or church-controlled organizations. Next slide. So we also don't do agricultural production. There's some exceptions to that. So, and I think we've been getting a lot of questions if we can do cannabis production. Unfortunately, no, that's not eligible. So agriculture production we can do when it's not eligible for Farm Service Agency assistance, and it has to be a vertically integrated project, and the project would be limited, the production portion would be limited to 50% and 5 million. So other things that we don't cover would be golf courses, cemeteries, research and development projects, and guarantees where the lender or any of the lender's officer has ownership. Next slide. So we do have a collateral requirement. It must be documented value sufficient to protect the interests of the lender and the agency. The discounted collateral value must normally be equal to the loan amount. Typically, we allow 80% of the appraised value for real estate, 70% or less for equipment, and 60% or less for accounts receivable and inventory. So we do have two different guarantee fees. We have an initial guarantee fee that is 3%. We also have an annual renewal fee that is 0.5% based on the outstanding principal balances of December 31st each year. Some other requirements that we must have a realistic repayment ability. A feasibility study may be required for new enterprises, and there is a tangible balance sheet equity requirement. So for startup businesses, that would be 20% and 10% for existing businesses. And for energy projects, it would be 25 to 40%. And any individual or entity that owns more than 20% would be required to provide a unconditional guarantee. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you all the contact informations for the business program staff, that if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of us. That being said, if anybody has any questions, if not, we'll hand it off to Thomas for the B&I CARES Act portion.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Appreciate that presentation, that overview of USDA development. Again, USDA is the lead federal agency for investment in rural communities. So you just saw tip of the iceberg of some things we can do. So appreciate that. Our next panelist, who's going to talk about the B&I CARES Act, the enhancements to one of the programs that Denise spoke of. I'd like to again bring back Thomas Kimsey to the
Thanks, Denise, for the overview of the B&I program. So yes, let's talk about the B&I CARES Act this morning. The program, next slide, was part of the CARES Act from Congress. The USDA was given approximately $20.5 billion program level, which equates to about $1 billion in loan authority. Joseph, you could just sort of skip through this. I'm not going to go through the history of the program. Denise covered most of these few, so you'll just, there you go. So the funds are available until September 30th, 2021. We don't anticipate funding be around that long just because we only have $1 billion to work with. The interim final rule was published May 22nd, 2020, with the funding being available as of the 22nd of May. So we're just getting started with the program. There's still plenty of funding available. Hasn't been a number of loans funded yet, but a few are getting started. So here's a good overview of the program, the CARES Act. I want to emphasize this is not a forgivable loan program like the PPP many of you may have participated in through the SBA. This is a term loan strictly for working capital, including payroll, healthcare costs, principal and interest payments, rents, leases, and other things you can see there. but it is strictly working capital. The loan has a 90% guarantee for the lender. It has a reduced guarantee fee of 2%. They also opened it up to eligible ag production, which is different from the traditional B&I program. So that's available there. And we've got modified terms up to 10 years with deferrals up to 3 years that we'll talk about a little later, go into more detail on that. We'll also talk about the capital and equity requirement under the CARES Act program. We only have a 10% equity requirement as opposed to a tangible balance sheet equity requirement that a lot of you may be aware of, that we can go into more detail as we go through the slides. And the collateral discounting, there is no collateral discounting like normally under the B&I program. So that definitely gives everyone a lot of flexibility there from a collateral standpoint. And we have up to $25 million of maximum loan amount. Next slide. As I mentioned, the maximum term is 10 years. You've got up to 3 years of deferment. The first year is 1 year of interest and principal payments deferred. And then you have the opportunity for 2 additional years of principal payment deferments as well. As we talked about earlier, you can see it includes payroll costs, health care benefits, principal and interest, utilities, and anything that's related to working capital, any of your expenses, including cost of goods sold, are eligible too. Next slide. And again, an overview of the program: a 90% guarantee for the lender, 2% guarantee fee, which is reduced from the normal 3%, and there still is the annual 50 basis points, 0.5% annual renewal fee on the guaranteed portion of the loan. Next slide. As far as eligibility, if you want to read about the legal part of it, you can go to the CFR there. If you're up late or wanting some reading material, I'll let you can go through that. As I mentioned, agricultural producers are now eligible, and as long as the borrower was in operation by February 15th, you're considered eligible for the program as well. Next slide. Again, this is for working capital only. It's to prevent, prepare, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic. That's what the CARES Act was specifically set up for. And again, agricultural production, including independent agricultural production, are eligible if the applicant's loan exceed the Farm Service Agency Guaranteed Loan Authority of $1,776,000. So this is important to note that you do need to talk to Farm Service first to see if you qualify for their guaranteed loan amount, and it is up to the maximum amount of $1,776,000. If they decline your loan or you exceed that, then you are eligible for the B&I CARES Act, but you will need to check with them first as far as with the agricultural production. And I've had a couple of questions on that recently, but again, you do need to check with Farm Service first. Next slide. Healthcare, administrative fees and expenses, property taxes, property insurance and hazard insurance, principal and interest payments, rents, payments, leases. So most anything you think of as working capital and operating expenses are eligible under the program. Next slide. And again, here's some additional eligible uses: taxes, utilities, business inventory. Again, here I'm talking about ag production, including inventory, feed, seed, fertilizer, livestock, excluding livestock for breeding. So for the ag producers, most everything is included in there. under that, which is, again, not typically eligible under the traditional B&I loan program. You see marketing, shipping, and other expenses that may have been incurred due to the coronavirus, and then loan cost and essential loan-related expenses are eligible as well. So a lot of eligible uses here under the program. This is an important slide just to make sure everyone understands we cannot do business acquisitions. We cannot, purchase land building. We can't do expansion. And we can't do refinancing unless it was after February 15th, 2020. And an interesting question we had in our webinar we did a few weeks ago was, well, what about a line of credit that you may have in place? Well, that line of credit, if you're drawing down after February 15th, that portion is eligible, but anything prior to February 15th would not be eligible. But this is, again, an important slide to keep in mind. It is not for expansion, purchasing businesses, refinancing in. It's strictly for working capital. Again, the maximum loan amount is $25 million, so it certainly gives us a lot of flexibility for small, medium, and large businesses to get up to $25 million. And again, the loan shall be based on the cash flow analysis and not be greater than the needed to cure the problems from the COVID-19 emergency to the business. It is designed to help through this pandemic. And here's where we get to, many of you are asking, well, what is that loan amount? It's 12 times the borrower's total average monthly cost of eligible working capital expenses. And, an important point that the national office, I guess, clarified with me a couple weeks ago, it's not 12 times the average monthly, it's 12 times that monthly average cost. And they want this to be flexible. It doesn't have to be over, again, average over 12 months. It's 12 times the borrower's total average monthly expenses. The borrower receiving the loan in amount of less than the maximum amount may apply for additional loans in the future. So that is an important feature. You can come back and borrow additional funds. So we'll go through an example here of a maximum loan amount. Again, this borrower example has monthly operating expenses of $100,000, but they also received $250,000 of PPP funding. So we've got our $1.2 million loan. We do have to subtract out any PPP loan or the economic injury disaster loan you may have received. Any federal assistance that was received has to be backed out of the eligible loan amount under the B&I CARES Act. So in this case, we had $1.2 million. We subtract the $250 of the PPP, and we're left with $950 of total loan amount. Next slide. So just an overview again. The working capital loan is done on multiple draws. It's monthly draws based on the as-needed basis. Very important for everyone to understand. It's not a disbursement of working capital. It is done on a monthly draw, as-needed basis. Again, the maximum loan is 10 years. We're getting a little longer there than we normally would. The normal 7 years. And again, up to 1 year of principal and interest deferment with an additional 2 years of principal deferments if selected. So if you took all 3 years, you'd be left with a 7-year term loan to repay on. Next slide. As far as collateral requirements, the loan must be adequately and fully secured as normal, but an important feature, very helpful, there is no discounting, so we don't have our traditional 80% loan to value for a real estate or 70%. A lot, and the value of the collateral is fair market value, but must be equal to or greater than the loan amount. Next slide. Appraisals of real estate and chattel are not required when the amount exceeds $1 million. So if you're smaller loans, you don't have that requirement. Another nice feature here. And another feature here, if you have an appraisal that's been done within 2 years, you can utilize that, so we don't have to go out and get new appraisals. That's a very important provision that will be very helpful and help expedite the processing of these loans as well. If it's over 2 years, yes, we do have to get an appraisal, and the appraisal guidelines are really up to your lender who will be processing your loan as well. Next slide. And here's a really important feature of the loan that's different than the traditional B&I program that most of us used to dealing with, the 10% tangible balance sheet equity for existing business and 20% for new businesses. Under the CARES Act, it's 10% balance sheet equity. That includes owner contributed capital of 10% or 10% of the total fixed assets, or the borrower could contribute 10% of the total eligible project cost. But a very important distinction from the traditional B&I program. Next slide. And we've got 3 examples of here of how we come up with the equity, the balance sheet equity of 10%. Applicants do not have to be considered an existing business, as stated in the traditional B&I reg, only that they were an active business as of February 15th. In this example of balance sheet equity at closing, you can see total assets of $2 million, total liabilities of $1.2 million. So we've got the total assets minus total liabilities and divided there gives us the 39.5% equity. So we've got very strong equity there. So no questions there as to our equity requirement. That one's pretty easy to look at the balance sheet. The next one here is 10% or 10% of the project cost contribution. This borrower estimates working capital needs of $125,000. They utilize the B&I CARES Act to arrive at the $1.5 million maximum loan amount, and the borrower plans on contributing 10% in the form of cash, as you see here. So again, they've met the requirement of 10%, and they've got their maximum loan that's reduced to $1.35 million based on their $150,000 contribution. Next slide. And then lastly, which is I think is a really excellent feature of this CARES Act, is you can count your SBA PPP loan as equity contribution, as you see in this case, where they have the monthly operating cost of $1 million. They received the $250,000, so they subtracted that, and they're eligible for the $950,000 loan. But the PPP loan, the $250,000, gets them more than the 10% requirement, so they've got 20%, leaving them, their total working capital needs of $1.2 million, with the B&I CARES Act providing $950,000. And this is a really nice feature. I think a lot of borrowers will be able to utilize their PPP loan as an equity contribution. Next slide. So here's some important regulations and application requirements to go through. The loans for the working capital are classified as categorical exclusions for the purpose of the agency's environmental requirements, which will certainly help expedite the process as well. From the lender's perspective, there are no draft loan agreement required. And from the borrower's perspective, no business plan or feasibility study requirement, which certainly, helps expedite again. The feasibility study is one of your time drivers that takes a lot of time and effort and expense to the borrower, so that's eliminated as well. Another feature that's different from the traditional B&I program, you can utilize borrower's tax returns, where we typically utilize financial statements. So that's a little different there. And again, as far as agriculture producers, they must meet the industry standards for accounting practices. And And the last one on here is certainly very important for your smaller loans to utilize the simplified application for loan under 600,000. Denise, I don't know if you want to speak to that simplified application a little bit, you know, maybe how much that helps expedite or not. One for those smaller loans to have that simplified application to utilize for the CARES Act. Next slide. The applications are processed in each state office, so you'll submit there. Funds are maintained in the National Reserve account at the national office, and the office, the agency will consider applications in the order they received. They may also, if funds become tight, they may do priority point scoring that we've seen in the past under the B&I program when funds become tight at the end of the fiscal year. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through the program. Next slide. As far as the agricultural production, that was limited to 50% of the total loan amount for 500,000 million. And the agency may publish future notices in the Federal Register revising the limitations made available for the agricultural production as well. Next slide. A lender and a borrower may combine applications on a traditional B&I loan with a B&I CARES Act. So if you did want to do that expansion or acquire new land and building equipment, you could utilize the existing B&I program for that, and then you could use the B&I CARES Act for working capital. So I think that's a nice feature. We haven't seen one like that, but I think that'll be something we'll be looking at as we receive applications as well. And the B&I CARES Act does not impact the B&I funding. It is a separate bucket, so we don't have to worry about it impacting the B&I loan programs funds. And here's some links. Just again, if you're looking to do reading and want more information, you can certainly go to the link there, read the government regulation that's published, as well as the funding availability, and then the website for the USDA Business and Industry Program CARES Act. So there's lots of material there on the USDA website for you to look at and to read. A link for the different state offices, the USDA coronavirus resource page as well. And next slide. And then here's the contact information for the Hawaii State Office and the different areas as well. So for those who may not have that, certainly gives you the contact information for the different areas in the Western Pacific. With that, I think that covers most of the CARES Act. Denise, I don't know if I left anything out or you want to add to some of what I went through. I know I went through it quickly, but certainly welcome your commentary or if you want to add to the discussion.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job covering all of what the CARES Act allows us to do. But like Thomas said, if you go back and look at the items that are not eligible for B&I CARES Act, so that would be like equipment expansions, that kind of thing, we could definitely do a combination where you are funding those on a traditional B&I guaranteed loan, and just the working capital would be looked at on the B&I CARES Act. So that's something we really can do. Other than that, I really think we should open it up for Q&A and see what their questions are.
Yeah, Thomas, thank you again for that very thorough presentation on the CARES Act enhancements for the B&I loan program as it relates to working capital. Again, you know, there are some businesses that, you know, either fell through the cracks in accessing SBA programs or maybe additional resources were needed, and so this came as a timely response to that. So, without further ado, maybe for now, I know our guest panelists are on standby, but maybe we can have Thomas, Denise, and your business team get on the screen, and then Tony, you have a few questions for the business side of the house.
Yes, hi everyone. We do have a few questions that were posted, but I'd like to remind all the attendees, if they have a question, they can type it on the screen in the chat option to your right. There you can also pose your question on the questions tab. So we'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and type in your questions. But Thomas and Denise, we did get a few questions that were businesses on Guam have been closed since the pandemic and are in need of working capital. What is the typical turnaround time for processing of the B&I CARES Act application?
Well, that's something that we really want to expedite because we know that these funds are really needed. So the key here is us getting a complete application so we can make that turnaround time. That being said, we want to be proactive and work with the lenders early on as early as possible. So we have all the information that we can take it to loan committee and make a decision. I think our regulations require us to turn around within 60 days. I don't foresee that long. Hopefully we can do it really quickly, but I really plan to work quickly with the lenders. If we have a complete application, I'm hoping that we can turn around within 2 weeks.
Yeah, I agree with what Denise said, Tony. It's really, having that complete application, being able to put together the financial analysis and put that package together so we can deliver a complete package so Denise and her team can process it.
Thank you very much, Thomas and Denise. We still have a few other questions, so I'd like to keep you on active for the moment. Earlier on, Thomas, you talked about appraisal requirements and that appraisals are waived. This one business, the question is, I've not had an appraisal done on my property in the last 2 years. Is there other means or documentation to show the value of the property? For example, can I use my real property tax assessment as a means of supporting the estimated value for my collateral property?
No, we would need a new updated appraisal for that, unless the loan's under the $1 million.
It depends. If the loans is under $1 million, then the appraisal wouldn't be required, and it really would be at the lender's discretion if they would be comfortable with the tax map evaluation if it was under the 1 million to get that value.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Thomas. A few other questions. I am a business owner and I own a majority of my business. Are personal guarantees required for the Business Care Act loan?
Yes. Anyone with 20% or more ownership has to personally guarantee.
Thank you again, Thomas. Just a few other questions. I am a foreign business. Am I eligible to apply for either the Business and Industry Guarantee Program or to apply under the Special Business and Industry Care Act Working Capital Loan Program?
So is it a corporation, foreign corporation?
A sole proprietor. Did you want me to pose that question again?
I know foreign typically, if it's a foreign-owned entity that's employing and people in the States normally is eligible, but I guess I haven't had a sole proprietorship question, so I'm not sure on that one. Given it's a sole proprietorship, Denise, I'm not sure. Normally,
we'll get back to that one because I know in the past that you had to be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. I'm trying to remember if that was laxed or not. So I'd kind of defer and we can get back to everybody on the call with that question. Shirley, do you know? Are you on?
I'm here. So I guess in this instance, though, are the funds have to be utilized in the U.S.
yes.
So again, getting back to that question about the sole proprietorship, I mean, that is something that we would have to look into. But I know definitely the funds have to be used in the U.S.
Thank you, everyone. One final question. What are the requirements to apply? What specific forms and what additional documentation is needed to submit an application? This question could be either for Denise or for Thomas.
You know, go ahead, Denise.
Go ahead, Thomas. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, from our perspective, you know, some of the same information feasibility study. You know, I don't have to prepare a term loan agreement, but you know, I do need some sort of, you know, executive summary or narrative so I can put together some sort of, I guess, modified business plan. I'm not looking for something, you know, a book, but we still need, you know, what I would say the basic information, you know, from, you know, either 3 years tax returns, financial statements, personal financial statements. So it's a lot of the same thing. I think what we're trying to do, and I think what the agency's trying to do, we're certainly trying to put together a more modified and simplified credit memo with that information, but we still have to do our cash flow analysis and put together the basic information so we and the agency can make a determination of the loan approval.
Thank you, Thomas. And one final question. My business relies heavily on receivables at this time. Is receivables an eligible working capital purpose? And can that be used to calculate the average monthly working capital needs of my business? This question could be for either Denise or Thomas.
Well, certainly, you know, accounts receivable is certainly eligible. I mean, yes, we could use that for the collateral. You know, I think that's typically what you use for, you know, working capital. And so that's certainly eligible. As far as calculating that, you know, again, would have to understand the business of how their business operates, you know, from the cash flow per standpoint and the accounts receivable. But, you know, certainly on the surface, yes, it's eligible, and we could work through how their business operates from the heavy receivables that they utilize.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I don't have any other questions that are being presented on the webinar. Again, I'd like to give the audience, the attendees, the opportunity to pose any questions before we move on to the next part of the agenda. So we'll give you a minute or so to go ahead and type in your questions.
Okay, and while that's happening, I just want to add a few more things. Again, I'd like to invite the attendees to follow our Twitter page. It's at @RD_Hawaii. A lot of current and live information is posted on that Twitter account. You get live and real-time information. So again, that's at @RD_Hawaii. And again, just as a reminder, I want to let the panelists know I did get 4 messages that attendees couldn't call in. They were having problems with the link. But I just want to remind everybody that shortly thereafter, we will be providing a YouTube link to today's presentation. So I want to thank Joseph Coleman from the Coleman Group for assisting us with today's presentation and also having this recorded. So Tony, do we have any more questions from the attendees?
Joe, I do see some over in the chat feature. Tony, I don't know if you're seeing those.
I don't see any at this time. Are they?
I've made some slides so you guys can answer them if you want to go through them. There's 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph.
There we go.
Question. Go ahead, Tony. There's, I think Joseph posted a question that.
Yeah, great. The question is for the panel, the form we have seen at the bank is 4279-1 and -2. This is the original B&I app. Can we somehow remove the unneeded sections if we are applying for the B&I CARES Act? I guess this would be a question for maybe Denise or Thomas.
At this point, we're utilizing the same forms for the regular B&I section. I would just have the lender work with RD so we can ensure that we don't need the whatever sections that they're omitting. Some of the information may not apply, but it just depends on the request that's coming in. And I just have the answer to the question that was posed earlier regarding the citizenship. So individual borrowers must be citizens of the United States or reside in the U.S. after being legally admitted as permanent residents. So that is a requirement for the B&I and the B&I CARES Act funding.
Thank you, Denise. We have another question. To address this particular question?
That really depends on the loan amount and if we're getting a complete application. It's our intent that we're going to expedite all of these B&I CARES Acts as much as we can as they come in, because we know that the working capital is really needed. Where we can go 30 to 60 days, I'm hoping that we can turn it around within 2 weeks. It really depends on the completeness of the application when it comes into us.
Thank you, Denise. We have another question again. Could we get more information on the construction loan guidelines? I guess I can answer that question. Absolutely. We can provide that information. You can contact me or our office. I think at the end of the presentation today, Joe or Joseph will be posting our slide with our contact information. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so here we go. We are interested in agriculture/farm. What program do we seek first?
You would contact Farm Service Agency first.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Let's see if we have any other questions. I don't see any other questions popping up.
If I may ask Joseph, do you think you can also post that one slide for the local contact for the Guam office that has Tony and my contact? I know we'd like to tap into Denise and Thomas for further questions, but I know we're in different time zones and across the date line, so we don't want to bother you too much. So Joseph would post our contact information. There it is. So we'll keep that up there for a moment. Our office is located in Tizen in the Packer building, right at the airport. Same building as Social Security, the U.S. Social Security, and you know, I guess if you're familiar with In-N-Out Barbecue, I guess a lot of people, that's starting to become a landmark. So we're in that very same building. We have our contact information there. Contact us for any further questions or comments that we can answer. Certainly, we have our panelists that will be happy to help us answer any questions. Again, just a reminder, please sign up for free at RD_Hawaii for our Twitter account, and we should be able to have the YouTube link shortly after this presentation so that those who missed it and those that weren't able to get in will be able to see the presentation at their convenience. So without further ado, I'd like to again thank our panelists. We have our state director who's been very supportive of our area, Brenda, Iokepa Moses. Denise, our business program director, thank you for taking the time, as well as your team with Shirley and Jeff, who are specialists that will be reviewing applications that come through our area up to Hawaii as the approval authority. And then Thomas, of course, thank you for the National Rural Lenders Association. Thomas has also been to Guam once and was about to make another trip in March, but you know, unfortunately the COVID-19 hit us, so I know he's anxious to get out here and meet with the community. Of course, our distinguished host, Catherine Castro from the Guam Chamber of Commerce, and Eileen from the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much for spreading the news to your membership, and we look forward to further networking. Again, I'd like to just turn over the mic to Brenda. Do you want to make any closing remarks?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks, Joseph. Thanks, Thomas, for inviting us onto this webinar. We want to take every opportunity that we can with partners out there to get our programs out to the communities. Joseph is a wealth of information, as well as our staff here in Hawaii. So everybody that's attended the webinar today, we hope that you look at our website. Follow us on Twitter. You'll get the most recent stakeholder announcements that come out on deadlines for new programs and grants opportunities. So please feel free to call our staff to get more information, and go to the website. There's so many opportunities for our rural communities to utilize. So I just encourage that to look at what programs we have. We want to use all of our federal monies. Don't want to send anything back to the federal government. We want to use it within our communities. We encourage.
Sure, thanks, Joe, and certainly I appreciate the opportunity again for the National Rural Lenders Roundtable to partner with the USDA, and particularly with the state office and Joe there in Guam. I have to say Joe's become a good friend, and I always appreciate the opportunity to work with Joe. He has a wealth of knowledge, and as Joe said, we did have a trip planned to come out there this past March that got interrupted by the pandemic, but we are still planning to come out when things allow us to travel again. So we will be back out to visit, and we certainly look forward to that. And you know, we're here to help. We want to, as Brenda said, we want to get the dollars out the door and help as many small businesses as we can. So again, Joe, thank you for the opportunity to participate, and you know, thank you for your help, all you're doing there for the USDA and your community.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Denise, did you have anything you want to say before we end the session today?
I just wanted to thank you for coordinating this, and thanking Thomas and the various chambers. Really good information to get out, and I know this was a lot of information, so if anybody has any other questions, don't hesitate to contact Joe, Tony, or anybody from the business program staff. We're here to help. So you know, if you didn't get your chance to get your question answered or get your question in, you can always still contact us, and we'll walk you through the process. So thank you.
Good point, Denise. Also, Eileen, are you still there? Do you have any final comments you want to make to our attendees?
There we go. Yes, thank you again, Joe and the entire USDA RD team, Mr. Thomas Kimsey. Again, please visit our website and follow us on social media for the latest on the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
And then Catherine, I think Catherine had mentioned that she had to run out. I'm not sure if she's still there. Catherine? Okay. Well, again, I want to thank our attendees, our panelists for participating and bringing value to this presentation. And I just want to remind everybody that this is not the end of our outreach and our presentation. I'd like to say that this is just the beginning. So we'd be happy again to meet one-on-one or with another group if the opportunity is there. So without further ado, again, I want to thank you. I want to thank Joseph Coleman again for monitoring this and making this a successful webinar. Everybody have a nice day and a nice evening. Good afternoon. Thank you.